Hello and welcome to a very special live episode of the Energy Strategy podcast. Today we are diving into a conversation that is long overdue, the Gen Z leadership gap. Our latest comprehensive study titled Gen Z Crisis at the Workplace, which calls for urgent alignment, has uncovered something deeper than disengagement. From boardrooms in Bengaluru to boardrooms in Brisbane, the signals are really, really clear. There's almost like a silent friction brewing between Gen Z and their leaders, and if left unchecked, it could redefine the future of work. But before I go any further, I want to give you a bit of a background in terms of why this study in the first place. So we saw a program by Palki from First Post, and in that program, all that was said, and she didn't say it, she was reporting what other people were saying, was that Gen Z are quiet quitting, Gen Z are lazy, Gen Z are distracted. And I have to say, as soon as I saw it, I got really angry. And the reason I got angry is I hate it when people generalize and have this broad generalization for a generation. And, it's like, I just kind of thought instead of this finger pointing, and I remember my grandmother used to say to me, if you point a finger at someone, three fingers are pointing back at you. And I also believe that when it comes to leadership, the first four letters of leaders or leadership is lead. I think leaders need to lead and take the first step. But having said that, there is, finger pointing on both sides. There's a famous song that goes, "Every generation blames the one before," and that's when the young generation is blaming the older generation. But then we also have the older generation consistently making fun of the younger generation. I must admit, I've been guilty of this as well. I've got young daughters, and when they were young, there was nothing gave me greater pleasure than teasing them. So it's like it's on both sides. And really, today is about bridging the gap. And let's look at the kind of business economic ramifications. Soon Gen Z is going to be a major proportion of the workforce, in the next 5, 6 years, maybe 30, 40%, right? And we looked at this stat that literally said that Gen Z in India, one in two of them are planning to leave their current job in the next 2 years, right? And people don't understand the business economic impact of this because when someone leaves, if you want to replace them, the cost of replacement is anything from 50 to 100% because that includes the recruitment costs, the retraining costs, etc., etc., and then they have to come up to speed, right? And and these are costs, by the way, that are not a line item on a balance sheet, so they get ignored. But the impact is there. And the second thing is, if you have a huge portion of your workforce that is disengaged, they're not going to give you discretionary effort, and that also has a balance sheet impact. You have so many organizations that are focusing on productivity increases, but I feel instead of that, if they focused on employee engagement, they would get much better increases, right? So that gives you a sense of this. But why India? And India, if you look at it, is the world's largest Gen Z population. On the one hand, it's at the forefront of digital transformation, but yet it operates within a hierarchical system. And because we operate in India and Australia, we also studied Australia, and Australia is a little bit different because it's real contrasting because Australia, in comparison, is very egalitarian, but strangely enough, the engagement level of Gen Z is not high in basically Australia as well, and people just don't feel open in terms of speaking up. But today we are focusing in on India. And I'm glad to say we have two dynamic voices. First, we have Suruchi Mehta. Suruchi, and I'm reading this out so I don't miss out any of the highlights, is a seasoned HR leader who has been at the helm of managing mergers and acquisitions with the most critical stakeholders, the staff. And it's a very difficult conversation to have, and I can imagine how hard that would be. And has also helped shape the culture at IBM, Lenskart, and United Legs. She's the co-founder and also the CEO at Artha School of Entrepreneurship, where she guides entrepreneurs to do things right from within to grow big from the outside. In today's discussion, she brings decades of wisdom from the C-suite. And on the other side, we have Kavya. And Kavya is a bold but curious, deeply thoughtful Gen Z brand specialist who represents the voice of a new and purpose driven workforce. Kavya has interned with 6 companies, so she has a range of experiences and leadership, exposure. And prior to joining the Madras branding company as a project manager, her small but deep experiences at these multiple organizations will give us insights into the Gen Z mind. And together, what we'll do is unpack what's really happening, not just in surveys, but in real conversations, lived experiences, and unspoken expectation. Now, just one thing with this is, this is not a debate or a fight between the two generations, but it's a measured discussion. But having said that, nothing is to be sugar-coated, right? So, tell it like it is. Um, so, so let's kind of kick off. So let's go with Kavya first. So Kavya, you have experienced different work cultures across what 6 organizations now during your internship, and now you're working full time. What, in your view, makes Gen Z feel truly motivated and engaged based on your experience at work?
So the first thing I would point out is like where our interests lie. So the work should align with what we are truly interested in doing and what our strong points are. And the
Hmm.
second would be getting, like constructive feedback, not just
Hmm.
plain criticism. If we are getting feedback, so then we should also know like how to incorporate it. So
Hmm.
like simple tips and ways will like be able to help us in leading to. And the third will be, like in some points if we're doing good work we should just get the appropriate appreciation for it, like not even rewards, at least a little bit of yeah, you did a great job today at the end of the day, so it'll just keep us motivated to just keep going forward.
Uh, Very interestingly, in our study, this came up as well. This thing about
Okay.
feedback. And the interesting thing is, historically, Suruchi, you would know, performance review sessions are done once a year. But what Gen Z
Correct.
want is more timely feedback. They have such a strong desire to grow that they want feedback on a more kind of regular basis. And interestingly, when you spoke about getting appreciated, that is a common element across all staff, not just Gen Z, but it's very, very important. So, were did you ever feel a disconnect between what leaders thought was important and what actually mattered to you personally?
Yes, actually, we as a, like a people my age, we focus more on the work culture, like the quality of work, like how we are, the how are the output is coming, how is the deliverables coming, is our client satisfied? So we focus more on that. But at the higher level, eventually in any organization, at the end of the day, it just comes to the company making profits. Obviously, that's a major thing. So, but while making profits, they sometimes like lose track of what's actually at the base, like at the core of every organization. So it should be more like producing quality work rather than just focusing on the profits. I just felt a little bit of disconnect over there because it would be much better if like they could appreciate the work, and like instead of just putting up a mediocre work for profits, we should be like giving our level best, so that way we will also be like satisfied that okay, we are functioning to our full capacity. I just felt that one, that
No,
bridge.
that's good. That's good. So coming to you, Suruchi, from your years of leadership, your experience in terms of leadership roles, how have you seen expectations shift with the entry of Gen Z?
Yeah, Kavya, I wouldn't agree more. I think what you asked for is something that any generation would ask for. Very, very similar things. I think it's just how we look at them and respond is where a gap emerges. So
Mm,
intergenerational challenges have been there always, and the younger ones always would like to come and challenge the older ones. In fact, I remember, I think it was in when I was doing my summer training in Maruti Udyog, and at the same time the MBA batch from the IIMs and all came in and also come in with expectations, and then also leaders felt that they were really entitled and so on. And I
mm,
remember the vice president of training, learning and development, the lady, very, very, powerful and bold lady,
mm,
Penelope Trinidad. She lined them up in the corridor and gave them a heavy beating. This is what I expect. This is what you will do. I don't want to hear this or that. And I was like a summer training. I still had one more year, in school before I would take up a job. And I aligned myself there and then, as I heard her speak, because I think at that time there was, the opportunities and jobs that were available were few and far between. There was,
yeah,
liberalization had just beginning to kind of come into India. So there were jobs either with big industrialists or in the professions if you were going to say an
yeah,
engineer or be a doctor. So it was
yeah,
important to get good jobs and hold to them. And there was
yeah.
also this uh, you know, um, people live with scarcity at that point of time as
Yes,
compared to,
yes, yes.
generations today who have access, and the access is there because their parents, the X's or Y's, had been able to build for themselves with the .com or later BPO or general liberalization. There was more money at hand to build things faster, and
Mm,
therefore the Gen Zs and say the alphas are born into more liberal or more affluent as compared to what others have been, and therefore they're used to getting some things in hand, right? So if you go to a school that doesn't have a uniform and you're choosing what to wear, you're already into independent thinking from being a toddler, right? So you can't be told
mm,
later, hey, align,
mm,
right?
mm,
you
mm,
have you are thinking independently, you are looking at flexible ways of doing things, you are
mm,
born with tabs in your hand, the way Spotify works for you, how things work so easily,
mm,
is
mm,
something that you're used to. So
mm,
flexibility and independence is something that I see an ask, which is not unfair, because this is what this generation has experienced, and you need to be able to provide that. Even 25 years ago, open work spaces, the cabins had gone away, open work spaces had come, town halls had come, people were encouraged to ask questions. And
mm,
I mean, 2 decades later, those questions are going to become sharper and they're going to become more direct. And I think,
mm, mm,
the leaders have to accept that. And
mm,
to your other point, Kavya, about having the purpose in your job, better quality of work, again is a valid point, I think, because uh, uh, grunt work everybody has to do, right?
mm,
Um, we've all done grunt work. We've worked with our hands. We've understood, and the expectation from leaders from Gen Z is also the same. But
mm,
I would expect that the quality of grunt work, improves. So if
mm,
there is
mm,
technology that can
mm.
support a lot of stuff, then that should be brought in, because it's I don't think Gen Z is about not wanting to do the work. I think the question is, why am I doing this when it can be done
Why am I
easily,
doing
right?
it?
Why
Yeah,
am I doing
absolutely.
something that can easily be solved with technology? Why waste our time? So that is the question that leaders need to think about.
Yeah.
Definitely. So that's one change I see. I do see a big change about work-life balance, or having personal well-being, which is something that our generations, and as parents also, we do that often. No, we all tell stories about in our time we used to, and all the kids laugh and say, yeah, yeah, right. You all used to
Yeah.
swim across rivers. So that's a joke, right? To go to school and stuff like that. So I think
Yeah.
that has also emerged because people, even as people like us, when we've been working, we've been looking for work life balance. Gen Z is asking for it. So it's not
Mm,
that Gen X didn't want it, it didn't ask for it. But
mm,
Gen Z is asking for it. And I think it's good to co create a future like that if you're able to do that. So
mm,
just because conversation is more direct, it is a
mm,
little, difficult for a baby boomer or Gen X to say, hey, listen, you're confronting me. So the confrontation is really the issue more than what they're asking for being the issue. And
mm,
I think the other thing that I think that another thing I hear a lot about is about loyalty and discipline. Like, um, uh, they don't want to spend time, they want to quit at the, F of feedback, they want to resign. And,
mm,
so to be fair, at least in India, outside of say the large MNCs, even companies are not being built to be 100 years old. Companies
mm,
are built to be
mm,
sold. So there is, the expectation at the employer end is also different. He is building
mm,
something. A startup is being built to, go public or to, get acquired or something like that. So the
mm,
timelines have shifted, and it's kind
mm,
of wrong to then expect that, come. And I think the other very big change is that
mm,
when we went to work, we didn't
mm.
have access to social media. We didn't know
Yep,
much.
yep.
We used to read Business Today and find what's happening once a month or whatever the newspaper is telling us, right? So we
Mm,
looked upon our leaders for guidance and for learning. And the general trend was you got to learn now and then you will grow. Now,
mm,
Gen Z has access to global information,
mm, absolutely. Yeah.
and they come with that information. Of course, I'm sure they have a lot to learn from their leaders. I'm not saying
Mm,
that, but they
mm,
have opinions which we didn't have early on in
yeah.
our career.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
those are some of the things I've seen change. And I think one more thing is about transparency, about pay rises, about promotions, which traditionally has been confidential. You don't need to know why X happened, what happened to Y. But these are questions that Gen Zs are asking openly. Like
Mm,
if I have to get promoted, what do I need to do? So
mm,
tell me and I'll do it. Because
mm,
they are very
mm.
clear about their needs and asks. Values are different, I think, in some sort.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And you touched on a few things there. Like when you look at the difference in the generations, I reckon Gen Z is the most informed generation. And they're also the most socially aware. They worry about things like the environment, which our generation honestly never did, right?
Correct.
They are more socially aware of things that are happening. And in that sense, and I think also our generation was driven by going up the corporate ladder, making money, buying a fancy house, doing all that kind of stuff. This generation is more about experiences, and their value set is completely different, you know?
Correct.
Like I hear young people now taking not just gap year after finishing university, but taking gap years during work. They're saying, I'm going to take a gap year. I'm just going to do what I want to do. So the whole mindset is different. They are less interested. I'm not that they're not, but they're less interested in buying a house and being locked into a house. They're more
Yeah.
interested in experiences. And I think the next thing you touched on is definitely, like when you look at the older generation for information, we look to a leader. If a leader said something, it was the gospel truth. Now, as an example, even with my kids, as soon as I say something, they'll immediately go on their phones and fact check it.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
that's just a fact of life. So you can't look at it as disrespect. You just have to look at it in terms of the fact that they are way more informed than we are, right? So
Correct.
that's good. Thanks for that, Suruchi. So Kavya, coming back to you, you already talked about feedback, and you wanted more feedback. But let's take it a bit deeper. What type of development conversations do you expect as a Gen Z person? So about your own personal development. You're muted, Kavya. You might want to check your microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So as I like mentioned earlier, I would the one thing like I look forward to is constructive feedback. Like if you're criticizing me if my work is not up to the mark, then you say it's not good, so you have to improve. So I should know where and how. I need those two pointers. Like, how can I improve myself? And
Mm-hmm.
what is the main issue? You can't just like come and just plainly telling me that your work is not up to the mark, so you have to improve and just leaving. Then I would be clueless, right? I won't know like where should I be improving myself. Then I'll be like also wasting my time on meaningless, stuff. So if you just at least guide me through, then I can just improve and give you a better quality of work. I feel that's very important. And if there are people who are extremely seniors, they will expect me to just understand it on my own, figure it out on my own. If I'm new to the job, then I guess it's like like your thing to teach me like how to take it further. I feel that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, just in terms of guidance, because what
Yeah.
came out in the study is that Gen Z definitely want a lot of guidance,
Yeah.
especially around personal development and what the next step is. Were there times as a Gen Z person in all your internship positions where you wanted guidance but you didn't feel comfortable asking for it?
Yeah, actually, there were a few moments where, like I would have simple doubts, the basic of doubts. So I would be very hesitant to go and ask it to my peers because I would think maybe they might undermine my capabilities, like simply just judge me or just like brush it off. And some people have even like made remarks straight to my face like, this is a simple thing, why don't you know this, like you should be knowing how to do this before you have joined the work. So I think that shouldn't be there. Like if I don't know, I'm willing to learn. So what's the issue? So you can just teach me and I can just pick it up from there.
Hmm. No, absolutely, absolutely. Hey, Suruchi, this is about frequent constructive feedback. A lot of leaders think they actually do it, but the research suggests otherwise. Gen Z don't agree with this. Do you believe that one is why do you think this perception gap exists? And the second thing is, do you think the annual performance review, which is the only time conversations are held around, personal development and performance management as such, is a thing of the past now, and the frequency needs to be more frequent?
Yeah, well, I think there are 2 points here. One is this is not a new thing. I think good people management skills and good feedback skills important for you to, get your organization right. Can you hear me? So, say that hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're dropping in and out, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah, yeah, I'm surprised. Sorry about that. So one thing is about good people management skills. Now, this is a
Mm-hmm.
need across generations, and it has always been an issue.
Mm-hmm.
There are organizations that recognize this and invest in it, and then there are organizations that don't. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of issues come up in the how of doing things, how you how you communicate your expectations, what you need to do to make sure that your team member is able to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that all organizations need to take seriously. The
Mm-hmm.
other issue is that in India, growth is, linked to promotion. So everybody is like, if I'm a good performer, give me a promotion, give me a, make me a people manager, because that's the way, it's an hierarchical system. And that causes, people not ready for jobs to be put in jobs, and then their team members struggle. And this is the real issue across many organizations that
Mm-hmm.
that causes this issue. Now, coming specifically to the ask of Gen Z, I think you also mentioned it at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders in the, Gen X or baby boomers time are more used to the annual way of giving feedback, sitting formally, communicating something, or maybe 2 times a year. And it is not something that comes naturally. While Gen
Mm-hmm.
Z is looking for right now here more open, more two-way conversations. How you're defining feedback is different. For Gen Z, it's more here and now, every day. Let's work together. And for Gen X, it's about let's do this formally. let's do this, let's set up time and talk about it. And even when they talk about it, because of previous training, you were taught the sandwich effect, say a good thing, then say a bad thing, then say a good thing, that confuses people.
Mm,
Versus, doing being straight and direct yourself and being okay with it. And therefore,
mm,
there is an opportunity to learn and upskill yourself in this area and be okay and comfortable. Um,
mm,
Another
mm,
issue that managers face a lot, and I hear them say that is, if I say something, this person will leave. The managers are scared about that. They're like, if I say something, the people don't like to hear these things and they will leave. And like
mm,
Kavya said, it has to be constructive. And if you are going to only be think you didn't do that, or I expected you to do this, or should I do this, or let me
mm,
do it, because you don't know the how of it, is
mm,
what causes the problem. And
mm.
so I think a little bit of training and more focus in organizations is required. Many are doing it. It's not that it's absent. I think tech started this, early and then followed by. So the more traditional companies are still struggling, but I think others have come on, brought in apps, brought in systems, more frequent check-ins, maybe a quarterly system. But has it become a way of life? Has it been embraced? Are people comfortable? No, I don't think so. Not yet.
Do you know, it's interesting. The one bit that I feel completely aligned with Gen Z is this thing about constructive feedback. Because even when I was in the workforce, right?
Yeah.
And I used to look forward to my annual performance review. Most people didn't, they used to get scared of it, but I did, right? And the reason for that was I'm driven by growth, like personal growth, right? So for me, feedback was good, and constructive feedback, any feedback would have been good. But the strange thing was that many managers I had didn't really give me enough feedback, right?
Hmm.
And it used to drive me nuts, right? In fact, I'd have the performance review session, and they would say to me, "Yeah, you're doing okay. No, no, you're doing really well. There's nothing to say," and that would drive me up the wall because I'm looking to get better. So anyway, one day I thought
Yeah.
this is not working. This one manager of mine kept doing this, and it was driving me up the wall. And then I went to him after the session. I said, "Look, I look forward to these sessions. I'm really looking for some constructive feedback."
Hmm.
And he said, "Oh, sorry, I will do that." And I said I want it more frequently as well, which is why I can relate to this aspect in this survey, right?
Yeah.
That
I
came
agree.
out. And then he said, "Okay, all right," and I want it more frequently. And then he said, "Okay." So one day we had to do a presentation. It was a small room, and normally I stand when I present, but in this small room I sat down because three speakers before me sat down as well. It didn't look right for me to stand up and present, right? And immediately after the meeting, he took me aside and he said, "Hey, you wanted feedback, right?" He said, "I have to tell you that, you should never present while sitting down. You should always present while standing up." And I just looked at him and thought, "Oh my God, is that all you could come up with?" You know what I mean? Like it was just horrendous. And it used to drive me up the wall. And then I decided that I would be more pointed in my discussions. So I would literally
Hmm.
say, "Okay, I want to achieve XYZ, or, tell me what you want me to achieve, exactly what you want me to achieve. So I will get, full ratings on my performance review, right? Tell me exactly
Hmm.
what. And then I'd make notes and then I would know how to do it. So I was kind of like reverse engineering the whole performance review. But I've never been happy with my performance review process. It's
Yeah.
never been great. And I think you touched on this. But people have a one size fits all, leadership style. And what people, I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that you need to actually work out for each individual what makes them tick, what their core needs are, what their values are, and tailor your discussions around that. Would you agree with that, Suruchi?
I absolutely agree, and I have no doubt about that. And that's something I introduced maybe 10, 12 years ago when I used to work in a company called United Lex. And feedback and development go hand in hand, right? So I did away with training calendars. They are
Mm,
not required. You can't have generic, calendar for the year. What is required, a function requires or an individual requires, has to be provided for. and you
Mm,
need to do that in real time so that
mm,
at the end of the day it impacts the outcomes and the output that the business requires for growth as well as
mm,
individual growth. And
mm,
that worked really well because there was a whatever interventions were done because there was a pre-assessment, a post-assessment, people understanding what they need to do from a training perspective and development perspective. And the same would apply to a manager. A manager cannot follow a one size fits all, right? There are
mm,
different styles of leadership only because you have to have different strokes for different folks. And even if you do
mm,
have one predominant style of leadership, you need to be able to step back and say, hey, I think this will work better if I approach it this way. And
mm,
today it is
mm,
even, what we did 10, 12 years ago was was different. It was not being done. But now
mm,
it's so much more easier to do that, because if there is
mm,
some support you want to give to your team member, you don't have it in house. It doesn't need to be developed in house because online on the internet you will find
mm,
many ways of getting your team members to learn a particular skill. And
mm,
not only simple linear programs but also adaptive programs that are
mm,
based on the level of skill that your team member already has. It's a question about thinking about it and linking it back to the organizational goal and strategy so that you know that if I do this, the output is going to only impact my business. And therefore
mm,
the myopic view of no, I can't afford this, or training is discretionary cost, or let's not do it, or let's just do, everybody should do something more, democratic way of doing it is not the best way to support your business today. Your businesses are very under a lot of pressure, and
mm,
margins are thin, and they have to be done in different ways to make sure that you get the best out of your people in the time that
mm,
they are with you, and you are able to deliver. So again, this goes back to people management, and I think Gen Z is being direct in asking for it, which I
mm,
would applaud them for, and that's something that all good organizations should be. And I
mm.
think leaders, like you said in the beginning, have to do the heavy lifting to see how to address this in a different way, and
Yeah,
not, yeah,
absolutely.
hide behind saying they're too demanding and they're too
Yeah,
entitled and things like that. That too,
yeah,
there is merit in some of that, but not
yeah,
for everything.
yeah. No, absolutely. Hey, Kavya, one of the things that came out of the study was flexibility. Gen Z want work flexibility. In your mind, what is work flexibility? Like, what exactly is it that people want? What does your
Yeah.
generation mean by flexibility in terms of the work?
So I would say one is the location. We we have that work from home option. So that's in terms of flexibility. And another one is instead of just clocking in the hours like 9 to 5, I prefer like if we have tasks assigned for the day, if they are just for example take 5 tasks I have to complete today. So if I
Mm,
complete it within 5 or 7 hours, that should be the end of it, right? Like my work is done. But if you go in organizations, there's a saying that good work is rewarded with more work. So I think that shouldn't be done. Like my job is done, so I just have some free time so I can just do my own thing. So that
mm,
kind of flexibility I should think should be bought. That would be much more better. Some
right.
people are efficient and some just take more time. That's the difference.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Suruchi, coming back to you, one of the gaps, a notable gap we noticed was the availability of mental health support. So, as you would know, mental wellness is almost like a pandemic stage now.
Yeah.
A huge portion of the population is going through these issues. Um, Especially interestingly in India among Gen Z men, right, more than women. How can leadership ensure that, this is something that's taken seriously? Because again, this could be a generational mindset issue, where, the older generation thinks, if you have an issue, you should just deal with it, as opposed to get some kind of external assistance. What's your advice to leaders out there? Like, how should they tackle this issue? Because this is a gap, and it's also,
Mm.
mental wellness is an issue globally now.
Mm. Yeah, and just before that, Chris, I'd like to just make a point to Kavya, and based on what she said, about work and that 9 to 5, and if I have 5 tasks to do, let me do them and let me go my way. I think this is one area where the leaders have faced a lot of frustration. They feel really frustrated because they feel that maybe the new generations are looking at work as a transaction based thing. 5 tasks I have done, let me go. And they're looking for more ownership. They're looking for more, commitment to take something to. It's not task driven, right? To find growth, you got to think and contribute and make things happen and go beyond. And this is a really big gap, which I mean, I noticed it, so I brought it up. But I'll come back to the question about mental health support. I think progressive organizations for about 2 to 3 decades are already beginning to had begun to focus on this. So I know that, for example, counseling help from, say, companies like One to One, HelpNet was there, and then later many other
Mm,
companies sprung about, and then the apps came, and and they were made available. It's not they were not made available, and of course they were made available to both genders. It was about how many people felt comfortable using that, how many people felt okay without feeling shy or thinking that there's I'm going to be judged, which of course Gen Z doesn't think so anymore about it. So what do companies need to do to make, the options are made available, but how should Gen Zs feel comfortable? I think is to normalize it a little bit more. Making
mm,
something available in terms of policy is one thing, and
mm,
making something available in terms of spirit is another thing. So,
mm,
for example, if you have an employee assistance program, one thing to have it in the policy and you can reach out. Another thing is communicate regularly about it. Deal with
mm,
specific issues like you called out for men. They feel pressurized
mm,
at work, and maybe women need more, especially if they are, with families, more
mm,
more more time and more flexibility. So you got to make sure that when you're talking about it, bring in the cultural nuance. The cultural nuance is that the woman does pick up a lot of caregiving at home. you
mm,
know it is how the Indian culture is, and therefore you're focusing
mm,
more on that when you're creating the program. And for men, you're
mm,
talking more about the stress that they may carry in their head, about providing for, about taking care of needs that are unsaid but still expected out of the male. And
mm,
so I think the conversation needs to be more gender specific and nuanced, and
mm,
how it's supposed to support you. And then other things we need to do as a
mm,
part of our work ethic. So work
mm,
ethic today, especially after COVID, and in some cases, in some companies or say startup organizations way before COVID, have become
mm,
24/7. So you do get messages at any time of the day or night. You respond when you can. You get emails at any time, and that's something that Gen Z says, "Why? Why are you doing it?" It's something that is accepted by the rest of us as a way of life, but
mm,
there are no there's no division between personal time and professional time. And so that, is a debatable thing, whether always on is a good thing or not. And that
mm,
causes a lot of that mental stress. So how organizations choose to behave, you can also have a plan that unless it's an emergency, let's talk about it tomorrow. That doesn't make you less competitive. That doesn't make you have less work done, but it may just create some space for people.
yeah,
Of
absolutely,
course,
absolutely.
outside of that, Indian organizations have been bringing in policies that support younger parents or support young mothers. But I think most surveys internally will check the health of your organization around this, or more conversations in the organization. Like everybody has a town hall, so why not have an internal town hall or a podcast like this, something where three people sit together on talk
And they
about
take
how they feel
questions.
about some of these things, have data to measure how people are feeling about these things. And that's
Yeah,
what will make it more normalized. And like you said, if you spend some time in engagement and you spend some time in building that environment and culture, you will get far greater output than you would get from a demand in, somebody
command and
demanded you
control.
provide it. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, no, 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 that's right. So just to address this, Kavya, you raised a very good point. I finished 5 tasks, I should be focused on tasks. So it's a very interesting concept, and two generations look at it quite differently. On the one hand, I think if you want to progress, you have to almost perform at a high level before you progress,
Yeah.
right? So you've got to keep that in mind. And if you just do the bare minimum, then no one is going to promote you. That's one factor. But having said that, when it comes to leadership, staff will go above and beyond if they feel leadership is going above and beyond. It's a two-way street, right? So if you get something, then you will give something back. So there's sides on both sides of the equation. One thing I did want to say is when we do the report, not only do you get a sense of what happens in India, but down to a gender level, and you go really granular, like when it comes to, mental health and well-being, what are the issues and what's prescriptive, what are the actual recommendations. But you can also compare it to like Australia to see, what the issues are, and like what's good about both kind of parties, which makes our study quite interesting. So let's go on to the next topic, which is uh, which is about inclusion, empathy, and authenticity. So Kavya, this is one of the key drivers, right? So, do you feel leadership is one approachable and authentic? And do you feel they have empathy for you? Like, do they really understand who you are in a professional kind of setting?
So I would say like if it's a small organization or a startup and there are like less number of employees, the importance is given like each employee is taken into account, like the well-being of each employee is taken into account. On the other hand, if it's like a larger organization, I think obviously it will be difficult to just keep track of how each person is feeling, each like individual is doing. But I can understand. But apart from that, yes, empathy will also be focused on the type of work like you are doing. Someone in the sales department or someone in the marketing department will be functioning different than someone who's in the creative department, right? So their brains like function differently and the work is also done different. You can't just club them all together in a single box and say you have to deliver this on time, because like creativity takes some time and sales is on like it's based on numbers. So I feel like leaders should be able to understand that also. You can't just force a creative person or like a designer to just give outputs, give me 10 posters a day or give me like 20 outputs a day. That will be kind of like difficult. You need to like think from their point of view too, like how they are facing, like how
Mm.
difficult it is to like come up with new ideas. I feel that
It's
is
interesting.
quite important.
One of the things that came up in my experience and in the study as well is that sometimes Gen Z feel excluded. Have you felt excluded because you're young? It's like, oh, we don't want them in this
Yes.
meeting. They're a bit too young.
Yeah,
Have you?
yeah, I've faced that during my internships because like people who are like senior to me by 10 or 20 years, they just think she won't be able to understand. Just like brush
Right.
it off aside, like you won't understand the level of conversation we are having. So just why be there? So I'm just saying, then break it down for us, right? Just break it down into simpler words. That is like if you make us understand, you'll understand it. So
Absolutely. So here's something interesting, Suruchi. So it's like the leaders in India, like around 85% um, basically feel that they lead with empathy, right? Okay. But Gen Z don't agree. So what advice would you give leaders like this who are kind of like thinking they're doing the right thing, but it's not landing?
Yeah. So I guess at the cost of repeating myself, I would say this is more a people management issue and not generational. Again, I think there should be more focus on building skills as a people manager, but specific to what the survey says, I think it could also be because the definition of empathy may be different for the two generations, how you read it and understand it. So, for
Mm,
example, a Gen X might feel I am empathetic because someone came to me and had an issue and I gave her ad hoc personal time off. I said, okay, go home, sort it out, come back. That for a Gen X is being empathetic, taking a few days off. But a Gen Z is looking for psychological safety, is looking for regular conversations, is looking for regular check-ins. Kavya, I think, said it 2 3 times during this conversation. I'm looking for that. They're looking for being included. They're looking for active listening. So listening is conversation is not one way, and leaders are used to doing that because they are not actively listening. They're not looking out to see what the other person is saying. Oh, because you're young, you may not have a perspective. Maybe a reality in some places. So I think that is one thing about how you understand empathy. The other thing is, and this can show up in many different ways. For example, an organization has a policy, and a policy is created because it provides a framework to do things. But if you go back further, people would follow the policy to the T because this is what the policy says. However, if you want to be an authentic, empathetic leader, you've got to be able to have some discretion in how you are going to apply that policy,
Yeah, that's
making sure
absolutely
that you're
correct.
still maintaining fairness.
Yeah.
Another thing, India is very hierarchy conscious. Organizations are very hierarchy conscious. So now it's very difficult for a leader to operate within the realm of discipline and still show the empathy that Gen Z is looking for, because they want to. And you see this at home. The structure is similar at home in families that are more conscious of that hierarchy, or
Yeah.
how you
How you
talk
talk to
to.
someone.
I
Yeah.
talked to a CEO. I asked him, like, what do you think is different about these youngsters? And the first thing he said was discipline. I mean, they won't even talk, acknowledge somebody. If I give way to someone in a lift, they won't even turn around and say thank you. So a leader is expecting that, while a Gen Z is just, like, what happened? Like,
Oblivious. They probably
yeah,
have their
oblivious.
headphones on.
Exactly. So that's the difference. And then Kavya is laughing. And then, leaders may feel from an empathy perspective that sharing of personal information around, say, mental health and all is not professional because it's oversharing. You're not
Yeah, yeah,
expected
yeah.
to bring that to
Absolutely.
work. But a
Absolutely.
Gen Z wants to normalize it, wants to talk about it because it's not their fault. Their schools have counselors, their
Yeah,
colleges have
yeah.
counselors. They have been encouraged to do that.
Yeah.
Leaders may think from an empathy perspective that work from home is not being empathetic, but a perk being given to someone because
Yeah,
of
yeah, absolutely.
how that person has proved himself or herself. While
Yeah.
a Gen Z would expect it as a baseline.
There's a baseline. Absolutely. Hey,
Yeah.
before I forget, to all the listeners out there, please ask your questions in the chat because we'll have a few minutes to take questions, which we'll try and answer very, very quickly. We are now coming up to our last segment, and then we'll go to do a bit of a wrap up. So, Kavya, very interesting questions for you, right?
Okay.
Given that you're early in your career, if you were leading a team of Gen Zers today,
Okay.
what would
Okay.
you do differently as opposed to the traditional leadership styles you've been exposed to?
The first would be, let's just say I'm leading a small team of Gen Zs, because if I'm leading a small team, then I will first try to analyze how each individual is, like what are their interests, what are their strong points, their capabilities, and their weaknesses. So I will just give them work and I'll ask them to choose whether you can proceed ahead with this, whether you can do this work. And if they can't do even the simplest of tasks, I will make them understand. I will teach them instead of just criticizing blatantly. You can't. Why are you not able to do this? I don't think that's healthy enough, I feel. And I would just give them. I teach them in a way that you do this and you do that, and I will definitely keep like a catch up every week, at least on Fridays. Like, how was your work this week? Was it good? Like, did you face any difficulties? Is there any, like, how can we improve further? So I think that will be better. And definitely about the timings, I'll just say, if you want to work overtime, you can. If you want to leave early, that's fine. Just finish your tasks, and you can just, if you want to do extra work, please go ahead. If you can't, then just do whatever is due for the day, and you may leave. will definitely be flexible in that. And
Yeah.
work from home also, like if you can deliver, if you can like work properly and efficiently from home, then why not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. No, that sounds good. So imagine you're the CEO now, right? Um, what
Okay.
is the one thing you think CEOs need to know about managing Gen Zs, right?
No, I think it's about like as a generation we are now more focused on curiosity. We are like driven. We are more inclined towards experience and what will the job, like what has the job to offer for us. Apart from like like packages and stuff, we just need to
Mm,
know like what is there to learn, how
mm,
is the experience working in the job. That is the major thing I would say. You can't attract us with just the packages alone, you just need, there should be more than that, like maybe a healthy environment or like attractive holiday packages maybe. We are also we also need holidays from time to time.
Experiences are key for Gen Z, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. We just don't want to sit inside four walls. We want to like explore stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Suruchi, this is like, because of the generation gap, it's almost like sometimes I think older leaders or current leaders, um, they want to connect with Gen Z, but I think they may feel like they're losing control or they're losing respect or standing or something. What advice would you give leaders like that?
Well, I think you can still have authentic conversations without losing control. So I think being okay by being a little bit more vulnerable is going to help
Mm,
deepen that relationship. And that's something that's not new. That's something that's always good leaders always do that. I think
mm,
openness to truly listen, understand, and not judge would of course help. And like Kavya shared, these are her asks if she was the CEO. And young generations come with a lot of idealistic thinking. A CEO has to run the organization, has to maintain it, make it profitable, make sure that the jobs are safe. There are many pressures on leaders, and therefore they have to operate in many ways that have to keep the ship running. But
mm,
being taking out some time for saying, listening, and reverse mentoring is a good way of doing it. If you take it
mm,
a little bit seriously, it's just scheduling some time and being able to get a perspective from someone
mm,
who may have a different view, and to be
mm,
able to share your views. So that perspective sharing, whichever way you do it, whether it's reverse mentoring or
mm.
organizing activities or engagement around some of these fields that reduce this differentiation. I think
No,
another
absolutely.
great opportunity today, and also from a cost saving perspective, is not to look at teams from the traditional functional ways of operating. And some companies have begun to experiment with that, but looking at them as cross functional and cross generational. So not really
Mm,
having functional teams. You can have functional for bare base and use technology, but for all the other key things,
mm,
and we do that for customer projects. We get people from everywhere to make sure that we understand what the customer needs are. And similarly,
yeah,
from an organizational perspective, if we get more cross generational, cross functional teams to deliver on key initiatives,
yeah,
that would have. And I really think that formal training on both sides is important. You need to get an expert in the room and talk to the Gen Z and say, hey guys, what you see on social media is sometimes a lot of glitter but not reality. Sometimes there is reality on it, but real life, I mean, there is no, you hard work, you cannot succeed without hard work. You have to get your hands dirty, you have to do things.
yeah,
You can't just look at it from a, hey, I'll do my five things and go. It
yeah.
doesn't work that way. So they have to be shown you know reality. And similarly, I think leaders also need to be open to looking at different perspectives, just like they do at home with their children. They get
No,
challenged. So
absolutely,
that's something
absolutely.
that you probably need to do.
Do you know it's strange? We didn't actually talk about this. We didn't talk about mentoring, but that is what I was going to say immediately after this. I did a podcast with Santosh Rao, who's the head of HR at Toyota India. And one of the things, I think Radhakrishnan Pillai said the same thing. It's like reverse mentoring is the best way to do it. It's like I have this phone, I don't know how to use it. Can you show me how to use it? And as soon as you do that, work out what are the areas that you need to be better at, and then do it. And ask the younger generation, and then they feel a sense of like they are valued. It's just a simple thing. Like don't just think about it's always a one way type of exercise. Anyway, it's time to take questions, but before that, I just want to come to a bit of a close for this session. First up, I want to talk about the study. The interesting thing about the what makes the study unique is the fact that we are taking like almost a 360-degree view of the situation. So across key topics, like for example, transparent feedback and communication, which is what we've covered in this podcast, purpose and values alignment, development and growth, flexibility and well-being, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have asked leaders how well they think they're doing it. And we've also asked Gen Z, how well do you think it's being delivered, right? So that perceptual gap is really unique in terms of our actual study. But beyond that, for each aspect, there are multiple subtopics. And in those subtopics, we have those gaps as well. So for each of these five topics. And and after that, probably the most important thing is it's a prescriptive set of recommendations. So this is not just a study, it's like a prescription for leaders in terms of what they should do. It's also a prescription for Gen Z in terms of, for you to get what you want to get, what do you need to do, right? So that's what's unique about it. And then coupled with all that is the top five drivers for Gen Z, the top five drivers for Gen Z by gender, because they are a little bit different to really get into that. And then so that is the interesting thing about the report. So if you're a HR manager, if you're a leader, and this is a bit of a issue for you, then the report is not just a study, it's not just about information, it's prescriptive set of recommendations. So now the other thing I want to say, of course, is that I just want to thank both our speakers today, our guests. Kavya, I think when I listen to you, I believe the future is in good hands. And I'm sure when you become a CEO, you will do all the right things. And thank you very much for your contribution. And Suruchi, the sheer wisdom that comes out of everything you say is just amazing. And thank you for sharing all your experience to it. The actual wisdom, the experience, it just shines through. So thank you very much for your contribution. Now we have some questions. Now, if we can answer these relatively quickly, because we don't have a lot of time, I'm just trying to get into this chat thing. Studio chat. Okay. Hi, Chris. Okay, so I get a question from Rishu. What will leaders get from this study? So, like I just said, Rishu, what leaders will get from this study is to understand exactly what the gaps are, and they'll be able to look at the study, and it's got a prescriptive set of recommendations across each of the main topics that I just covered off. So for each topic, like for example, mental wellness, what are the gaps and what are the prescriptive things leaders need to do? And it's all based on deep insight and analytics. So that is really what leaders will get. So if a leader is struggling in terms of, I don't know how to deal with this Gen Z, this report has the answer. Next question is to Suruchi. Anaga asks, Suruchi, you mentioned about leaders wanting staff to stay longer. But if they do not communicate that we need to stay longer to learn more, it will help. These are unsaid needs. How to sort this? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
so what I was saying, I think, was that, there is no shortcut to hard work. So one has to work to grow in life. And I
Yeah.
think I was responding to Kavya's point where she said, if I was given five things, I'll do them and go, then why would you ask me to stay? And I was responding to that by saying that hey, your leaders are looking for you to take more ownership and go beyond the five things, to look at the big picture, to contribute. So I don't think any leader wants someone to just sit in office and do nothing. It's about really, you know, um, uh, taking on more, asking more questions, trying to solve more problems. And you're absolutely right. It needs to be communicated. If I understand that Gen Z likes direct communication, and sometimes it's implicit, and maybe if the leader is able to show that big picture and communicate and look at the big problems that the organization is trying to solve and how you can in your job relate to that, maybe that will kind of bridge the gap. So sure, open communication, two-way communication is right. You're very right, it needs to be there, but it's not about just staying in office for the sake of staying. It's about taking ownership and moving things forward.
Mm, okay, sounds good. Okay, Kavya, just scrolling through these things. Yeah, okay. Question for you, Kavya. Do you think Indian workplaces understand what Gen Z wants, or are they just guessing?
So actually, they can see what we want. I wouldn't say like they like completely understand it. Like they can
Yeah.
see that we are demanding like flexibility in working hours, and we are like uh, wanting a proper, as I said before itself, constructive feedback. So
Mm,
like they can see, and they are trying to cope up with it, but I
mm,
don't think it's that efficient or it's like in place yet. Like the
mm,
weekly analysis reports, they, as you said, like they would rather do it annually or like so once in 6 months, but we are expecting at least the monthly or like weekly ones would be more efficient. And I think it will take some time to like bring that into circulation. They
mm.
can see,
Okay.
but I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. So the next question is for me. I'm a HR manager, so I'd like to know if this study also addresses what HR managers can do to build the bridge. I am struggling with attrition, and I feel that the cause is this gap. Right. So if you're an HR manager, like I said before, so the five big topics we cover is transparent feedback and communication, purpose and values alignment, development and growth, flexibility and well-being, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So for each of these, there are sub aspects that there are gaps at the high level, at a very low level, so it's very prescriptive. So for example, you'll be able to literally look at it in terms of saying, what are Gen Z's expectations in terms of constructive feedback or in terms of empathy or authentic leadership? What exactly is it at a very granular level? And once you understand those gaps, more importantly, there's a prescriptive set of recommendations in terms of what leaders should do and what Gen Z should do. So, for example, with Gen Z, it's really a case of okay, I want to get more frequent and constructive feedback. What should you do to get that? Rather than just feel sad about it, what should you do? And when it comes to leaders, it's prescriptive in terms of what they have to do as well. So, probably the unique thing about the studies is that it's not just a study, it's a prescriptive to build a bridge and build deeper engagement. Suruchi, this is an interesting one. What have you personally changed? Because I know Suruchi basically said, this is happens all the time with every generation. But this is a specific question, whether you have personally changed your leadership style for Gen Z in particular.
Oh, yes, I won't be able to survive without that. I think it's very important to constantly learn yourself and do things differently as they're expected. I gave an example about from 10 years ago where I actually changed the way we ran development because that was more focused to how it would help the organization as well as the employees and the leaders.
Mm,
I am, constantly trying to see how it works best, and I think that two-way open communication, active listening is very important because that is what that bridges the gap.
mm,
Um, um, it is a it's a tough one. Actually, how Gen Zs find this tough, I think their leaders find it equally tough because they will have to get work delivered, they have to
mm,
get the business to get the outcomes they need, and
mm,
they still have to retain the team members, they have to make sure, so there's a lot of pressure that even the leaders face to get things done in an environment that they are not used to, because they've been used to working in environments that they are told they do, or at the end of the day what the boss says is the last word. You may agree to disagree. You do it professionally, you do it subtly, but you don't do it openly. So I think it's a very, very different
Challenging for
environment
them as
also
well.
for the leaders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think development, for both sides, I think you said this before is absolutely critical because sometimes people don't do things deliberately. They do things in a certain way because they don't know how to do it. Okay, the next thing is for me. I've kind of answered this, but there are some other specific things. What do you think sets this study apart from other generational workforce report currently available? What makes it unique or more impactful in your view? So I spoke about some of the aspects, but the other aspect that is unique is there's three levels. There is like a executive strategic overview, which is a very high level view of what the story is. So by looking at that, you can get a sense of, look, am I doing the right thing or not? Maybe I need to make some changes. Then the next level is the deep report, which is very detailed, like 60 plus pages, which goes into everything in a lot of detail and has prescriptive set of recommendations by Gen Z, for leadership, by gender, the whole shooting match. But what it also comes with is a strategic interactive dashboard that people can use and click up and down in terms of working out drill down. So if I want to look at this with this, how does it work, etc., etc. So that is the next thing. The third level is everything that I've spoken about before. But in addition to that, I get personally involved with the organization and almost develop like a culture audit with them, like co-created with them, understand what their culture is, to literally not just for Gen Z, but take their culture to the next level. So we've had great experience in terms of one of the things we measure is ENPS, which is like how likely are you to recommend your organization as a great place to work. And we've helped organization increase that by like 60 plus points, which is quite dramatic. And that's because we know how to do it from the perspective of employee engagement, strategy development, and then actually measuring it and then taking action. So that's what makes it unique. So three levels, depending on how you want to go, is how it works. So yeah. So Kirtana, yeah, I can't see that message. Do you feel safe enough?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I can't see the message in the chat. Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, here's a question. It's for Kavya, is it, Kirtana? Okay.
Okay.
So Kavya, do you feel? Let
Yeah.
me just open it up. 1 second. Okay. So this question is from Aruna. Do you feel
Okay.
safe enough to speak your mind at work, or do you just stay quiet to survive?
Okay, so that also depends on the circumstances. So I won't say I would stay quiet for long. Like if I'm able to withstand it, if it's valid, then I will withstand it. But if I have to get my point across, that also depends on how you speak your mind. You can't just be brash and just just go and speak like whatever you want to. You need to like put it out properly in a proper manner so that you don't offend the other party, but you get your point across, clearly, just to make them understand. I feel that especially with senior people, you need to be subtle enough, and also at the same time try not to offend them and also get your point across. That can be done. It just needs a little bit of thinking. But I think you can't just stay quiet.
You
I
can't
would
stay
stay quiet
quiet.
definitely.
No, that's
Yeah,
right.
definitely not.
Okay, another question from Aruna, and
Okay.
I'll take it first, and then Suruchi and I suppose Kavya as well. You can jump in. So, what practical steps can leaders take today to bridge the trust and engagement gap with their Gen Z workforce? So what I would tell my clients is the first thing is you need to understand what the engagement levels are and what the pain points are. So the first thing is a very well structured employee engagement, not satisfaction, employee engagement study that really tries to understand what is happening out there. And then something that you can slice and dice based on generations, like, what do Gen Z want versus other generations. That would be the first thing I would do. And then following that, most people do surveys, but they don't take any action, is to actually get key people in a room and have a strategic action planning session where people actually develop actions based on the key pain points and drivers that were identified in the survey. And typically, when it comes to culture, I have to tell you, whenever we do employee engagement studies, the first thing I look at is leadership ratings. And all roads in terms of culture lead to leadership. I heard this saying once that the the culture of an organization is the shadow of its leaders, right? And the leadership work you do, because they have to start the ball rolling first up, typically leads there. So invariably, it's about leadership and communication, and understanding what those gaps are and taking action. So, okay, I'll pass over to you, Suruchi, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think I'll give a real life example to, cover what you just said. Um, when I was head of HR for United Legs, very early on, we did a survey, and our top two box score for how likely are you to recommend this organization to another was 47%. It was really very low. And what came out was that there is a divide between management and employees. There is not open communication, leaders' credibility. Everything that could possibly be wrong in that report was wrong. I have no
Mm,
qualms about sharing it so openly, because that's when Chris said you got to listen. So the first thing that we did was to take that report, get everybody into a room, 20, 30 people at a time, and bare bones showed that report. This is what you
mm,
said. And that was the changing point, because people said, oh my God, you're being transparent. You're actually sharing what we said. We thought you're going to do nothing about it. And and from there, it was a 6 year journey into
mm,
going into India's top 50 great places to work.
mm,
And and so it what Chris said, you have to really action. You really have to hold it together. You really have to work with employees, leaders, pick up the five agendas that the action items showed that were most important and most relevant,
mm,
and work at it bit by bit in teams that included employees and leaders, and
mm,
really make that difference on the ground. Without that, it's all lip service. There is nothing else. Your yearly reports will constantly, show that. So
mm,
there is no shortcut to working hard and wanting to create that. And I think the ownership is with all employees and not a really management versus employee thing.
mm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, look, that's been my experience. It takes time because culture, my definition of culture is the way we do things around here. Culture also has beats, eat strategy for breakfast. So you can develop the world's best strategy, but if your culture is not good, it's never gonna operate. It's literally your operating um, system, right? Um, so it's really a case of getting that culture right, and it always starts with listening, and it comes with taking action, and then co-creating. Like co-creating with people rather than top down, co-creating with them. How can we build a better culture and involving them in stuff? That's what I found. Okay, one last question. There are quite a few questions, but we need to finish up. So this last question is, how do you think business leaders respond when a young team challenges their decision? Is that encouraged or seen as disrespect? What do you believe is the right behavior? I think we kind of covered this off, but Suruchi, if you can answer this quickly.
Mm. So I think both things will apply depending on the maturity of the leader. A lot of leaders may still see it as disrespect. They may still not
Mm,
like it. They may not like getting challenged openly. So one has to find a way to communicate something and still maintain that, because it's never binary. There is no yesterday, hierarchy today, tomorrow flat. It's a journey, and that journey one has to work with. So there's responsibility on both sides, both on Gen Z as well as the leaders, to make take their steps. So it
Okay.
could be seen as disrespectful, and if the leader is, already on this journey of self-awareness, is aware, wanting to make a change, could be absolutely welcomed also. When I was in Lenscard, our CEO Piyush love to work with the younger people, prefer to work with younger people because they didn't bring that, a baggage from their past with them,
Mm.
and really loved being challenged. So it really depends on the
On
leader
the leadership
and
style.
your leadership style, correct?
Yeah, and you have to, sometimes as a leader, the best thing you can do is put your ego to the side, right?
Yeah, of course.
So yeah,
Got
we'll do one more question and then we'll come to a close because this is a very interesting question. This is Vijay Madhavan on LinkedIn. What factors contribute to Indian business leaders feeling unprepared or ineffective in inspiring and managing Gen Z talent? I'll have a crack first, and both of you, if you can jump in, right? Because you have a perspective as well, Kavya, and then we'll end the session. Um, so I would say people feel unprepared if they don't have the right information. People don't deliberately try to do the wrong thing. People don't deliberately try to be not an effective leader. But if you don't know how, then you're kind of struggling. So the first thing is to get insights. The second thing is to acknowledge that this generation has a different mindset. But just because it's not your mindset doesn't mean it's the wrong mindset. So understanding what each staff member, what makes them tick, and then acting accordingly. The third thing is what I said at the beginning, don't finger point and don't blame, because as soon as you blame someone, you're not taking accountability. As soon as you blame someone, you're not stepping up, you're actually stepping down. But once you take accountability, it's a whole different ball game. It's really like a case of saying, I'm not going to blame that generation. I'm going to try and understand them. I'm going to try and understand them. I'm going to understand what makes them tick. If they don't feel motivated at work, what can I do to make them feel more motivated at work? That is accountability, and that's where leaders come in. So I'll say this, and I think Kavya, if you can jump into this, and then Suruchi, of course, will have quite a bit to say on this for sure. Kavya, so what factors contribute to Indian business leaders feeling unprepared or ineffective in inspiring and managing Gen Z talent?
I would say unpreparedness in the sense, in my previous experience, I would say quiet leaders, like quiet managers, they will be like promising a thing to us. Like they will say, we will change this in the organization within 2 months time or 1 month's time, and they will not do it, or they might be like lax. They won't be like able to deliver it at that time. If we go to like question them, they'll just try to evade it, or like like put it to another later date. I think that's one factor. I've personally experienced it.
So
Yeah,
just
so I would
taking
say.
accountability, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, Suruji, I just have to say, our producer Keetana is saying there are three more important questions that we have to take. So anyway, Suruji, go quickly.
Uh, I'll just make one point. I think you said it quite well, Chris. I think from the perspective of middle managers, they feel unprepared because they many times feel sandwiched. They have to get the work done. They want their team. They can't afford to lose people. At the same time, they can't put a lot of pressure, or they have to take care of what their boss needs out of them. And sometimes when you're, not well trained or equipped to handle situations like this, a lot of the stress they take on themselves, and it kind of doesn't work for anyone. And so middle managers, feel sandwiched many times, and there has to be ways to support them in making that happen. And I think you already covered how.
Yeah, they need to know how, people don't
Yeah,
deliberately do the wrong thing. That's always
correct,
been my assumption.
correct.
Hey, Kavya, this one is for you.
Yeah.
Why do you think Gen Z professionals in India are leaving jobs so quickly?
Okay. So I would say it is the no like the our interests mainly. I would just point out to that it's the capacity of the job to keep us engaged from the beginning. Towards if it's like if some time has passed, let's say an year or so, so it'll just if it gets boring and it's like the same old routine day in and day out, we will think maybe it's time to like to get a change of pace. And some of us like choose it voluntarily, like we try to like skip companies every once in 2 years or once in 3 years because we want to like experience different cultures, maybe a different
Mm.
city, maybe a different state. That depends.
Mm. Okay, cool. Suruchi?
Same question.
Yeah, yeah, same question. Why are people leaving?
I think what I hear a lot of people say, I've asked around for this question specifically. I think people, Gen Z wants a lot of freedom. And I think they have those who don't have the pressure, the economic, financial pressure to take care of their family would like to, resign first, think later. These are words, picking up the words that I hear from the industry. They want to take time off, do different things, explore, mostly because they're bored, mostly because their job doesn't make sense to them, mostly because it's not fun, mostly because, they don't feel that they're learning, so they need to have different things to do versus having the same kind of job. But at the same time, I hear for Gen Zs, if they are, if they carry the financial burden of supporting their families, they're far
Mm.
more disciplined, they're far more, have much more longer tenure, they are very much dedicated to deliver what they have to do, they put their head down and work. So it is, there both sides exist.
Yeah. Okay. My arm has been twisted for one more question. Suruchi, is the Indian workplace really ready for Gen Z honesty, or do we still expect them to play it safe? I am from Gen Z, so this is a Gen Z person. They're asking
Yeah, you can't generalize this. You will have to look at the type of company, industry,
type
where
of
you're
leader.
working,
Yeah.
type of leader. Yeah, so you will see that there is far more scope in a young company with a young leader versus a traditionally run conservative company. So it is, and again, my request to you would be that it's great that you're direct and bring your points forward, but also have the capacity to uh, listen to another point of view, try and find common ground. So my way or the highway doesn't work on both sides. So one has to, come to middle ground to make it work.
See, and that's a really critical point to end this. It's not a one-way street. I know I said leaders have to lead, but it is a two-way situation, right? Just like Gen Z expect leadership to communicate to them in a certain way, right? And understand what their needs are and what their nuances are. Gen Z has to do exactly the same when it comes to leadership. You need to understand what their expectations are and work around that and be outcome focused. If you want to achieve an outcome, what's the best way to achieve the outcome? And be respectful. Achieve your outcome, but be respectful. Okay, all right. Let's bring this to a close again. So let me thank you guys again. Suruchi, thank you very much for all your experience, all your wisdom in human resources and just in people management and leadership in general. It's been invaluable having this conversation. I hope we have many more conversations. And Kavya, thank you very much for your honesty and freshness and your perspective. I think it's really important to listen to the voice of your generation rather than just ignore them. But one thing I would say is to your generation, you need to kind of speak up as well and get what you want in the best possible way. So thank you very much for your contribution. And thank
Thank
you
you,
both of
Kavya.
you.
Wonderful meeting
Thank you.
you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Chris.
Likewise, Suchi. Thank you, Chris.
Mm.
Thank you, Suchi.
No worries, no worries. Okay. Okay, everyone. Take care. Bye bye.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Okay. That's all.